Southern Living recently put out an article on things you should skip until spring. Before we get started, I'd like you to hit that subscribe button so I can afford all this stuff. Yeah. And stick around for the last one, because if you do this, even knowing you shouldn't, you will hate yourself. Number one, don't do this yet. Do not trim back your flowering shrubs. And we're talking azaleas, rhododendrons, hydrangeas. Why? Because they've already set their buds. They have not yet bloomed. If you go in there and just cut them back, you're cutting off those blooms. Now, there are some hydrangeas and other things you can cut back that do not bloom on old wood. You'll need to inspect that. So don't get in there and do that. If they're about to bloom, leave them be. Number two, you don't necessarily want to get in and just start cutting back all those grasses. Now, this is tricky for me, and I don't necessarily agree. The number one reason they say is those grasses, those plants that do need to be cut back are still harboring spots for wildlife to huddle in, little birds, little critters. Well, maybe you don't want those critters in your garden like I don't. I don't want voles in my garden, so I do cut those back. There are plenty of other places for things to hide in, but I don't want them hiding in my grasses. I do go ahead and cut that right off. Number three, applying mulch too soon. Now, depending on what part of the country you live in, if you don't get a lot of moisture, it's okay to start applying mulch. But if you get a ton of moisture, what's going to happen is if you apply that mulch now, before those spring rains have come in, it can get a little moldy, too wet. You can create these muddy spots that plants don't necessarily want. Nobody wants to sit in water, not plants, not you. So you want to be a little careful there. Now, you're going to see people out there mulching already, but they know those beds. They know what they're capable of, and they might be on a slant, so there's some runoff. Be cautious with your bed and mulching. It looks great, but it's probably a little too soon. And the last two are quick. Don't plant before that frost. Don't do it. You're going to want to. Don't do it. And critically, do not put outside plants you've overwintered. You've taken care of these things all winter. If you put them out too soon, you could kill them. They could get sun scald. Don't do that. Happy gardening.